Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'm coming down to the floor today for just a few minutes. I know our senator from Ohio is seeking recognition as well, just to mark, as I have most weeks, a new number, and that number is 11,584, the number of gun deaths that America has experienced over the last year since December 14th of last year. That date is burned in the memories of those of us in Connecticut and across the nation because that was the date that 26 people, 20 little 6- and 7-year-olds and 6 teachers and educators that were there to protect them died in Sandy Hook, and we recognize the 1-year anniversary. Anniversary sounds like an awful word, the 1-year mark of that shooting this weekend. And since then, almost 12,000 people have died at the hands of guns since then. And I've tried to come down to the floor of the Senate in the months since to remind folks that these victims have stories, to give voice to these victims. And I just want to share a few more today. We were all gripped just a few days ago by news of another school shooting, not too far from Columbine. Arapahoe saw another young man, very troubled, walk in with a shotgun and essentially open fire, apparently because of a grievance that he had with his debate coach. Caught in the crossfire was a 17-year-old girl, Claire Davis. Claire was described as outgoing, athletic, an excellent student. According to reports, she loved horses, and she recently placed second in an equestrian competition. Another student said that Claire is one of the nicest people I've ever met at Arapahoe High School. Claire survived, but she's still in a coma today, 17 years old, just because she was in the wrong place at her high school, a place where everyone expects you are able to go to school in safety. She isn't on this number yet because she survived, but her life is changed forever because of yet another school shootings that now seem to pop up on the news on a weekly basis. But it's not just these school shootings where mass violence takes place. Now you can pick up most local papers and every month see evidence of a new mass shooting. In Manchester, Connecticut, on December 7th of this year, 40-year-old John Lynn shot Brittany Mills, 28, Kamisha Mills, 23, and Atara Benson, 46, before killing himself in a quadruple murder. He had a history of domestic violence. Police haven't completely sorted out exactly what happened, but all 4 of them are dead, marking the 8th homicide stemming from intimate partner violence in Connecticut since January 1st, 2013. Just days before, in Alma, Arkansas, Tim Adams, who's believed to be in his early 50s, before killing himself, killed his 4-month-old grandson, his 4-year-old granddaughter, and the 30-year-old boyfriend of his daughter, Michael Williams, in the midst of what seemed to be a pretty simple argument about his daughter's court date, which exploded into an episode of mass violence which took the lives of a 4-month-old, a 4-year-old, a 31-year-old, and then, as many of these episodes do, the life of the shooter himself. And so these episodes of mass shootings are not just about what happens in schools or movie theaters or places of worship. They're happening in backyards in Alma, Arkansas. They're happening in apartment complexes in Manchester, Connecticut. And this body, in the 360 some odd days since December 14th, has done absolutely nothing about it. And the survivors of these incidents of violence are the story that we don't talk enough about. I've come down here to tell you the story today of Claire Davis and Brittany Mills and Kamisha Mills and Atara Benson and Tim Adams and Chase Don Williams and Kiera Adams and Michael Williams. They all died by gunshots, but they left behind children and parents and neighbors who are scarred for life. Psychologists will tell you that when a shooting occurs, there are at least 10 people who experience life-altering trauma. And what we know is that episodes of trauma just don't affect you up here, they affect your entire body. We have new developing evidence that show that children that are that experience multiple episodes of trauma in their life, and they frankly don't have to be as grave or as serious as a shooting, are physiologically affected for the rest of their life. People who witness trauma and experience trauma die earlier than people who don't. Never mind have episodes related to post-traumatic stress that stay with them for the rest of their lives. And so the spillover, the ripple effects of these 11,000 deaths, frankly, represent a number that can't even fit on a chart like this. And there's no simple solution, Madam President. I know that sometimes it seems like the only thing we come down here and talk about are stricter gun laws, and I just don't believe there's any reason why we don't require criminal background checks for guns before they're purchased, or that we don't just simply say that these dangerous assault weapons should stay out of the hands of people who aren't in law enforcement or the military. But that's not the beginning and end of the conversation. This young man who walked into Arapahoe High School, Carl Pearson, started shooting the place up because he was upset about his place on the debate team. Now, he apparently had a history of discipline incidents at that school, but he clearly had some serious issues and mental illness inside him that was not being identified and treated. And of course, the same thing can be said of Jared Lee Loughner and Adam Lanza, and now the long list of mass shooters across this country. We absolutely have to put more resources into our mental health system. And I appreciate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who have said, yeah, we're not willing to go with you when it comes to background checks or assault weapons, but we'll work with you on mental health funding. Well, in order to do that, you actually have to put the money behind the system. We've closed down 4,000 inpatient mental health beds in this country over the last 5 years. Why? Because the federal government is pulling funding from the very programs that actually support increased mental health resources that can identify these individuals before they perpetrate incidents of mass violence. So there is an illusion of bipartisan support around the issue of mental health, even while we have these outstanding disagreements on gun laws, and yet there really isn't agreement, because when you're fighting over the budget, when Republicans are calling for massive cuts to programs like Medicaid or the Mental Health Block Grant, then they're undermining the very programs that actually help identify people and help people like Carl Pearson or like Adam Lanza. And so enough is enough. I'll be down here after the holiday, and that number will now be over 12,000. 12,000 individuals, many of them little girls and boys like those represented on this chart, like Daniel Barden and Jesse Lewis and Dylan Hockley. And back in Newtown, out of respect for the families who are just tired from 365 days of grieving, there was no big public remembrance on Saturday. There was a small private ceremony that I had the honor of attending at St. Rose Church, where so many of the children were parishioners. And as tired as that community is, they also were bewildered in Newtown, because they went up to the state capitol in Connecticut and got laws passed that will prevent these kind of episodes of mass violence in the future. But they came down to Washington, and while they got a lot of meetings, they got absolutely no progress. Zilch, zip, nada. And as we head into 2013, Madam President, I hope that the memory of these little boys and girls won't fade as we get beyond the 1-year mark of Sandy Hook. And my hope is that people will start paying attention to this number, creeping up to 12,000 deaths. and will recognize that while this number simply represents the number of people who have died, there are all sorts of people out there like Claire Davis who survived gun incidents with injuries that will cripple them for the rest of their lives. And there are, frankly, hundreds of thousands of more people who surround these incidents of violence, who have their lives changed forever because of the trauma they experience. All of these victims, whether they were killed in the incident or were part of the collateral damage, they have voices that should command this place sometime soon to action. I yield back the floor.